There it is. He timed it right.
Counting to explode with the left. Oh, and that right, but Davis took off some of the steam of the punch, but still.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Thoughts in general about women fighting 3-minute rounds, Jonna?
I don't like them. It does no good for female boxing. I said it 2.5 years ago, and Amanda Serrano's first fight proved it. All Baumgartner's fights have proved it. They thought it'd be more exciting. They thought there'd be more knockouts, but it's actually the polar opposite. It's not exciting at all. Nothing about women doing 3-minute rounds is exciting. Amanda Serrano was one of my favorite fighters. Her 12 threes that I watched the first time, it took me 2 days to watch it. It was that boring. And then Baumgartner and Shin, I only tried to watch it today, and yeah, it was so difficult.
It's like the women are reserving their tanks to get through the full 10 rounds, right? And you're almost thinking, like, where's this change of pace? Like, where's the tempo change within this? Like, and they're almost afraid to go for a full knockout because they're like, well, if I don't get them out of here, I've got to go another how many 3-minute rounds off the back of this.
That was Sarah Cunn, who recently sat down with Shauna Brown to discuss the pitfalls of 3-minute rounds in a women's boxing match and why perhaps that's not the hill to die on for the sport's advancement.
You heard what they said. They were evaluating Alicia Baumgartner's recent performance against Bomi Shin that was for 3-minute rounds. We're seeing an increasing number of women boxers.
Now, there was already an existing contention. Why should the women fight for more time in a round if it's not going to get them more money? That was already there, but now they're evaluating entertainment value, which I think is a lot more important, because no matter if it's a sport, it's still entertainment. It falls under that umbrella, and people need to be entertained by what they're watching for it to generate revenue. More and more women boxers are starting to say the same thing. Not just Sarah Cunn, not just Shauna Brown, O'Shea Jones said it, Liana Cruz and Tiara Brown said it.
3 minutes ain't it.
It was a very honest conversation where if the goal was to add that minute to a round to, in effect, produce more knockouts and make the sport more marketable, it seems to be having the opposite effect. It's not producing knockouts.
The only fighter I can think of out there that's fighting for 3-minute rounds and simultaneously producing knockouts is Tim Tebow.
Very statuesque drink of boxing, campaigning in the women's middleweight division, and she is a hard puncher, though I don't think it's necessary for her to fight for 3-minute rounds to produce those knockouts, because Gabby Fundora, another very tall boxer, albeit campaigning at flyweight, she's producing knockouts all the time, and she fights for 10-2s.
Not 10-3s.
When the opening bell sounds in what was the Irma Garcia versus Emma Doolin super flyweight title fight, it only took 2 rounds for Irma Garcia to dispatch Emma Doolin. It wasn't for 10-3s either.
So maybe this isn't the hill to die on, and given all the advancement that the sport has been making in the last, let's call it 10 years, they don't need to go changing things.
Perhaps they're overemphasizing the role of knockouts in a women's boxing match, because when you look over at the men, a good number of their fights don't end in knockouts either. If you're talking about your average Teofimo Lopez fight or Shakur Stevenson fight, your average Devin Haney fight,
Richardson Hitchens.
It's not like all the men are out there racking up knockouts like it's nobody's business. A good number of them aren't, so maybe the women don't need to put so much emphasis on that, so much as the entertainment value of a fight. And what's made it entertaining up until this point is the fast-paced action you get from a 2-minute round as opposed to a 3-minute round, because there's no time to mess about. And if you're going to win, you have to do it, and you have to do it quickly.
You still have to be dominant within the round, but because there's not much time in the round, it's all got to happen fast, and people tend to enjoy that. Some boxers seem to think so, and some boxing fans, many of which I've seen, have now taken a preference. They prefer the 2-minute round over the 3-minute round. So perhaps the solution isn't necessarily more time in a round, but more rounds, because a women's boxing match does tend to breeze by very quickly. So instead of 10-2s, make it 12-2s and call it even.
2 more 2-minute rounds, which would equal 24 minutes total of action, which is still less than the 36 minutes you get with the men. I've even heard it said that there are some men that should fight for 10 2-minute rounds, since they don't yield much action within a round in a fight. Cut it short.
Devin Haney.
And the divide it creates within boxing's existing framework, those women who wish to fight for 3-minute rounds are doing so standing apart from the World Boxing Council. At a time where the sport still needs all the recognition it can get, perhaps this is just not the hill to die on.
Food for thought.
During the big women's boxing boom of the last 10 years, it was fighting in 10-2s at a fast pace that got people's attention, that made them watch. So maybe that's what they need to stick to.
Food for thought.
Now it's time for another installment of what has fast become one of the more popular segments here on the channel. Not the Ring IQ hate mail, but the Ring IQ mailbag, which is a lot more friendly. Vince Harris, friend of the channel, asked, Ring, do you think that UBOs, Unified Boxing Organizations, and the traditional way of boxing could both coexist moving forward? It seems like people are going to either extremes, where one has to die off in order for the other to succeed.
I do think it's possible for both frameworks to exist parallel to each other, albeit servicing different kinds of fighters. From the very beginning, when I heard that Zuffa was going to form a league unto itself, I anticipated what you're going to see a lot of over there are B, C, and D level fighters. Fighters who have already racked up losses using the existing framework, but would like a bit more stability than the existing framework provides to be able to fight on a regular basis, and not just as the B-side fighter, the opponent, to some major promotional outfits' latest peacock and fighter that they're developing, that a UBO like Zuffa could give those B, C, and D tier fighters refuge, amnesty, a place to go to gain some stability in their careers, making a bit more than what they've been making. And that's the role that Zuffa is more or less filling. Who's over there? Edgar Berlanga, coming off a loss.
Teofimo Lopez is set to go over there, also coming off a loss. When Rayo first signed to them, he was coming off the loss to Gary Antoine Russell. Now he's back in the winner's bracket.
A faded and former champion in Alexander Vozdik and a professional opponent in Radovanje Kalajdzic. These are the kind of fighters, more than anything, you're seeing wash up on the shores of Zuffa boxing, and thus, these are the fighters that this league can best accommodate, because if what you're talking about is a very well-to-do fighter that can draw all on their own, like a Canelo,
they don't need a league. They don't need Zuffa.
Granted that most fighters don't draw as well as Canelo, there are other fighters to a lesser extent that can also draw pretty well. Zuffa was never for fighters like Shakur Stevenson or Keyshawn Davis and many British fighters that have a grassroots following. They can sell tickets. Zuffa is not ideal for them because going over there would put a cap on how much money they can earn. Who Zuffa can best accommodate are castaways,
professional opponents, gatekeepers, journeymen, guys who are willing to work to make ends meet, and of course, castaways, fighters who perhaps may have started out as blue-chip prospects but are now entering the last leg of their boxing careers.
You think Richardson Hitchens is a castaway? The guy's unbeaten.
Richardson Hitchens might be unbeaten, but he's definitely a castaway, because if he were to try to move up to the welterweight division using the existing framework to corner fights with Ryan or Rolly or Devin, they just ignore him.
So he's definitely a castaway, a member of the Who Needs You club, best serviced by a UBO like Zuffa that can keep him active, can keep him fighting, and keep the money in his pocket. Thus, if the question is there a way for both the existing framework and the new one to not just survive but thrive parallel to each other? There actually is.
I don't know that it was Zuffa's intention to become a refugee camp, but that's very much the role it's fulfilling, so maybe that's what they can be moving forward. A place for those fighters to fight after they've done all they can with the existing framework. In that way, they can thrive, they can survive, but by putting together the best fights possible. With Zuffa, it's not going to be about the names.
The best aesthetic for a fight possible.
Not every fighter with 1 or 2 losses is going to make a decision to go to Zuffa. For a long time, Brandon Adams was rumored to be going over there just for him to double back. Vito Milnicki, he was said to be going over there. Then he signed to Samson Lukowicz. Jarrell Miller was offered a contract at Zuffa, and he decided to stick it out with Matchroom, stick it out with the existing framework.
There is still a noticeable ceiling on what kind of fighters Zuffa attracts the majority of the time.
Because we're not talking about unbeaten blue chip prospects going over there. It's still very early, but that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is fighters that are in need going over there, and they can make use of those fighters by putting together the best fights possible with the best aesthetic, because at Zuffa, it's not so much about the individual fighter, or it can't be.
It's gotta be about the aesthetic of the fight, the quality of the fights, and their entertainment value. That's their best bet to compete with the more established promoters, the more established names and brands. Maybe you don't have all that they do, but you can still put together entertaining fights, and that's their skin in the game.
That's how both frameworks can coexist, perhaps servicing different fighters that are in different stages of their boxing careers, all the while entertaining the boxing community at large. You get the bigger cards with the bigger names on a Saturday, and the smaller ones via Zuffa on a Sunday. That could work.
Yeah, that could work for Zuffa, at least for a while. Them specifically, because they don't yet have the name value or the brand trust of a Matchroom or a Top Rank to go head-to-head with them on the same night. Odds are, if Zuffa were doing a show the same night as a Matchroom show, a Top Rank show, PBC or Golden Boy, you know which shows most boxing fans are going to watch over the Zuffa card.
Focusing on regular programming, affordability, and the overall entertainment value of a fight at an affordable price, Zuffa can carve out a lane for themselves and succeed within it. Bottom line, there is a way for both frameworks to coexist.
And now over to the men's heavyweight division, yesterday's heavyweight contest where Big Baby Miller bounced back with a UD win over Cuban Olympian Lanier Perro in what was their WBA heavyweight final eliminator at the Fontainebleau.
In Las Vegas, Jarrell Miller reportedly threw over 1,000 punches and had new trainer Bozienis in his corner for the first time. At the start of the match, you saw Jarrell Big Gravy Miller taking his time, shooting jabs out there, fighting out of a Philly shell.
Big Gravy!
Big hungry.
Fighting out of a Philly shell, the influence of having a Philly trainer in Bozienis. I don't think I've ever seen Jarrell Miller use that guard before, but he started off yesterday's fight with it, shooting single jabs out there, being careful, being cautious, not really hitting the gas the way you expect him to in the first 1 or 2 rounds of the fight, and it didn't take long for things to pick up.
In spite of that slow start, I think the outcome would have been very different if Jarrell Miller chose to fight the entire fight that way, the way that he started off, seemingly trying to box his way in.
Box up Lanier Perro? The most success I saw Lanier have in the fight was at the beginning while Jarrell Miller was doing that, but once he started hitting the gas and stepped back into character, fighting how we expect him to, that's when he started winning.
Big Gravy!
Big hungry.
Barreling forward, throwing punches in bunches, pushing his man back, bearing down on him, leaning on him.
Big hungry.
They said Jarrell Miller came in about 15 pounds lighter for this fight than he did in his last one earlier this year. So he's definitely down in weight, but he's still a very, very big guy. Guy that size bearing down on you, leaning on you, throwing punches while he does it, it's enough to get you tired, and that's what happened to Lanier Perro. Struggling to hold back Jarrell Miller, trying to fight on the inside, getting touched up here and there. Jarrell Miller, as big as he is, he threw a lot of punches, over 1,000, and he landed a lot of punches, but he wasn't able to get rid of Lanier Perro, because the same thing that makes Jarrell Miller so physically imposing,
Same reason he can't really knock guys out. Limited range of motion.
he doesn't generate enough torque with his punches to be sudden, to catch a guy when he's not looking because he's so big. So him being big is what makes him physically imposing, but it's also why he can't generate knockouts. Not enough torque to rack up knockouts, but what he can do is bear down on his opponent and win a points decision by outworking them, by being the busier man in the fight, which is saying a lot because Jarrell's 37 years old and he's still hovering at around 300 pounds. So to be able to throw that many punches in a round,
In a fight, it's still something.
after the judges' scorecards were read and he was announced the victor, he called for a fight with Anthony Joshua, with Alexander Usyk, neither of which I expect to materialize. Anthony ain't got no time for Jarrell Miller right now. The focus is Fury, and Usyk is on his way out.
Who else did he call out?
He called out Wilder.
I mean, I think if the fans call him out enough, they're gonna want to make that fight happen. You know what I mean? Everybody said Deontay's gonna beat me out. He's gonna knock me out. There's only one way to find out. You know what I mean? So he's been knocked out plenty of times. I haven't. So let's make the fight happen, man. And we're the two top American heavyweights. We both can, make people tune in. And I think, me and my slick talking and him and his weird, dramatic speeches and entrances, well, I think it'll be entertaining.
Jarrell may have only one career defeat, but he's no spring chicken. He's getting on in age, and so is Deontay Wilder. I think the ideal fight for both would be one against each other.
How to best spend the twilight years of their boxing careers that are now winding down? It would be fighting each other. Yesterday's fight may have been a WBA eliminator of sorts that lines up Jarrell for a fight with Murat Gassiev, theoretically. But what gets him more money? A Murat Gassiev fight or a Wilder fight?
A Wilder fight that you could do right here in the US of A for a comparable dollar amount to what they just gave Wilder to go to the UK to box Derek Chisora. I think...
Now that was a Misfits Pro card, whereas this would be a Matchroom show.
Jarrell Miller tenuously is now once again a Matchroom fighter. It would seem that he's made himself useful. And this is a fight that Matchroom could promote in the United States, I think, for a comparable price to what Wilder versus Chisora costed, Wilder versus Miller.
It'd be about the same. They would probably try to bill it as a pay-per-view.
They might get some pushback on that, some static, but that is how I could see Wilder versus Miller happening. There's enough bad blood there and enough trash talk that the Americans are so fond of that you could put that fight together here in the United States and it would make sense.
For bragging rights.
There is also a legitimate argument that the fight that Wilder just had with Derek Chisora is a good rehearsal for a Jarrell Miller fight because Derek Chisora, like Jarrell Miller, is a pressure fighter. Wilder was able to eke out a win against Derek. Maybe he can do that against Jarrell?
I mean, it's not like Jarrell Miller's any more fast on his feet than Derek Chisora is, albeit being a few years younger. They're both kind of slow.
Neither could be accused of being a speedster. It's a similar fight for perhaps a similar amount of money. And I mean, what else is Deontay Wilder busy with? That he can't fight Jarrell Miller. You're not getting Usyk. And you're not getting AJ.
Might as well fight him.
If by some chance they can't put it together because Deontay's lukewarm on that idea, there is that Murat Gassiev fight that I just mentioned. Murat Gassiev is the WBA's regular champion, most in line to be elevated to full champion after Usyk retires. And I wouldn't mind a fight between him and Jarrell Miller either.
Pressure fighter versus pressure fighter.
Albeit one pressure fighter being noticeably smaller than the other. Remember that Murat used to reign as unified cruiserweight champion. He moved up to heavyweight, whereas Jarrell Miller has never been anywhere else or anything else.
No, he's a big guy.
A lot bigger than Gassiev, but where it becomes interesting is Jarrell Miller, for all his size, doesn't generate that much torque, that many knockouts with his punches, whereas Gassiev, that's a guy you don't want to stand close to. That's a guy you don't want to be in the pocket with. So who knows what could happen? I could go for Miller versus Gassiev.
On the heels of Jarrell Miller's big win over Lenier Perro, congratulations to him. Onward and upward.